Fanlon, a highly educated white editor of a liberal newspaper in a liberal college town, thought he had a decent understanding of racism, certainly in his own town. Well, he now knows he didn't. Almost a year ago, his paper launched an exploration of racism in Madison, Wisconsin. He created a special ongoing section on the subject, put staff to work on it, and he researched and wrote articles himself. He also established an interactive site on which community members could respond. I'm Dick Goldberg. Welcome to Insights. My guest today is here to share with us what he has learned in this process and how it has affected him. Kind of a white guy telling pretty much white people what they might not know that black people already know about racism. Hey, Paul, thanks for joining us.
Dick, thanks for having me.
Why almost a year ago did you launch this effort for your newspaper?
Well, it really started a little more than a year ago. I was introduced to an African-American minister and community leader over coffee, and he was telling me his story of experiences with being profiled in Madison. And I thought at the time that we were talking about something smaller, maybe an op-ed or something. But as we talked more, I thought it was so powerful that we instead enlarged it to be a major essay, major front-page essay in my publication, the Capital Times. And it took 3 months to prepare. I helped him along the way with the writing. And the piece appeared near the end of the year under the headline Justified Anger, the main headline, Justified Anger. And really incited a lot of community conversation and reaction about it. Between the time we first talked about it and the time it actually appeared, a major report came out in the community headlined Race to Equity, which contained a whole series of jarring statistics about the extent of racial disparities in Madison. The two of them, those two things, I think, maybe more the report than our cover story, created a momentum toward a community reflection on it that I think is still ongoing. The Justified Anger cover story, in fact, created a coalition that took its name from our headline, Justified Anger, and it is entirely a group of African-American leaders, a varied group of African-American leaders, which is going to be coming up with its own prescription soon for attacking racial disparities in Dane County and specifically in the Madison area.
Tell me a little more about the reaction. Was the reaction mainly from the white community, the black community?
It was from both. The major reaction from the black community was gratitude for us making such a major position and giving such a bullhorn or megaphone to an African American viewpoint that was that strong. There was some reaction from the white community about being startled at that he'd had those experiences. Some of his experiences were in being stopped by police, and the police in Madison, Wisconsin have a superb reputation. Most of them have college educations. It's a very progressive, enlightened department, and I think there were some people jarred by that.
I suppose stopped unfairly profiling.
Yes. Yeah. Stopped unfairly. Absolutely. There was a break-in at his church, and there was an example of his driving a nice car and how that came up. The initial anecdote was powerful as well. It had to do with him speaking at Rotary, and a woman coming up and in her mind, I'm sure, thought this was a flattering thing to say, that she really enjoyed that he wasn't angry. He wasn't an angry African American person, and of course that anecdote showed up and has been powerful since. So it's really been a year-long immersion, and the community's taking a new, deep look at things as a result.
Now, let me ask you. I mean, this is written by the Reverend Alex G.
Correct.
And why should we be listening to a white guy talking about racism in Madison, Wisconsin? Isn't that sort of, I don't know, inappropriate, weird, distorted, whatever?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and one I have thought about a lot, and one I've answered some. I was asked by a clergyman to write a column about what we ought to do, or what the white community ought to be doing, and my answer to that, more or less at the end of that column, was I'd ask African Americans, and really what I feel like I do is listen as a journalist with my training to thematic things from African Americans I've talked to. I have to say that one of the most revealing things for me over the past year has been being the only white person in a group of African Americans, and just being involved with African Americans in a way I should have perhaps been earlier in my career, but simply wasn't.
Why not?
So that's been,
Why not?
Because I think that's a big failing of mainstream media, and that one of the things that has come up, and I'm asked what I've learned through this. One of the most profound things is that obviously mainstream media, maybe it's not so obvious, but they do show up in a lot of African American communities when there are investigations, crimes, when they comment that when the police tape is up around a crime scene, that's when they go to the African American parts of town. But that the white journalists, predominantly white journalists, are not around for their culture, their celebrations. They don't really. We don't do a good job of reflecting the rest of their life, which isn't all about trouble and crime and disparities. There's a whole other side, and that's something that I've tried personally to do more about, and encourage my staff to do more about, so that we're more fully reflecting African American life in the community.
Okay, so not just talking about problems and discrimination, but talking about what the whole
thing is. Yes, yeah, and that ties to other things. I've had it said to me that some of the prominent African Americans in the community would like to be called to comment on something that's in the public affairs ecosystem without having it be the black quote-unquote reaction to something, that they'd like to be talked to and consulted and be part of conversations that are not race-related, and that seldom occurs.
Was there a first big surprise or shock as you got into this?
I'd say the biggest surprise and shock is that Madison has the metrics, which we can talk about in a minute, are shocking. But that a community that sees itself as progressive as this one, and thinks that it has its collective heart in the right place, still does not see the subtle racism that shows up. And part of it is that we don't have a significant African American middle class and upper class here. That comes up in a lot of conversations, so that there's not an easy intermingling of the races.
So in communities, surprise. You suspect in communities where there is a bigger middle class black number, then white people understand discrimination or what it means to be black in a more clear way?
I suspect it would. I mean, I haven't lived for many years. I've lived in Madison for most of my adult life.
Yeah.
But if I'm interacting socially with more different kinds of people, I probably have a better understanding of those kinds of people. I did a column a ways back for a gentleman named Errol Davis, who is a utility CEO here in town, a big deal. He went on to lead a university in the South, and he talked about that. And he talked about his wife shopping at a department store here and sort of feeling like she was watched and followed around.
In case you shoplift.
In case she would be shoplifting, and the recurrence of that theme around the absence of middle class and upper class blacks comes up a lot. It came up in a conversation I had with the chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Madison about how it becomes difficult for them to recruit because they'll bring faculty candidates to town to try to recruit to the University of Wisconsin, and they'll look around and not see a significant African American middle and upper class community.
I wonder why that is. Why Madison, Wisconsin doesn't have a bigger middle class black community. Any idea?
I don't really, because it's a we have a tough climate, but I don't know what that would be much of a factor. It has never had one in the 30-some years I've lived here, and I think you've lived here too. I don't know why it happens more easily in other communities, but some other communities, but it certainly, I think, does.
Why don't you, if you're willing, give us some of the data that makes discrimination more clear with numbers?
Sure. Soon after I agreed to work with Alex G. on this major cover story, and that again sparked the creation of our focused website and our ongoing coverage, the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families, which we are partnered with and worked with on some of their work, issued a report they called Race to Equity. And some of the numbers were as follows. Blacks are 5.5 times more likely than whites to be unemployed in Dane County, which is home to the city of Madison.
Which means you have like 25% unemployed among blacks.
Absolutely.
African American, okay.
That's true. 3/4 of the county's African American children live in poverty, compared to 5% of white children.
75% of black children are in poverty.
Live in
Okay.
poverty in this county.
Oh.
Half of all black high school students don't graduate on time, compared to 16% of white children. African American children are 15 times more likely than their white counterparts to land in foster care, and black juveniles are 6 times more likely to be arrested than white juveniles. In terms of their progress in schools, 48% are not reading proficiently in 3rd grade of African American children versus 11% of white children. The habitual truancy rates are 21% for African American children versus 2% for white children. And
those two might go together, if I may. I mean, if you can't read in 3rd grade, what fun is school in 4th grade? So it's no wonder you're not too motivated.
Agreed. The economic disparity is shown in this number, that the median household income is $63,000 for whites and $20,000 for African Americans. The births to teenagers is 15% African American, 2% for whites, and I believe African Americans are 10 times as likely to be incarcerated per capita. So those are some of the numbers. The numbers keep rolling. The same organization, not only has Madison and Dane County got a major issue with race, but the entire state does. And PBS and others have done marvelous work about Milwaukee as perhaps the most segregated major city in the country. And Madison has different problems, but the entire state has issues around this. I guess it's most surprising that a city like Madison, which has had a distinctly progressive, liberal approach to the way it organizes itself and runs things since the 1970s, has the degree of problems we have.
Why? Why is this that the state of Wisconsin and the city of Madison would be even worse than the country at large?
Well, I don't know. I think that's the question we're going to continue to pursue. I think that my focus has been more on a journalistic spotlight on the facts on the ground, so that white Madison cannot escape this as a theme.
They can say it's not their fault.
They can say it's not their fault.
Not my fault. I'm not a racist. I'm paying my taxes. I'm not doing anything wrong. So why should I feel bad or guilty? It's not my fault.
Well, and many people do. The reality is, though, that Madison is. I've used the easy a phrase, "tale of two cities," that people, the same kinds of people through the years, the Italians who came to our central city or the other immigrants who came here for a better life, we now have African American families escaping violence in Chicago or someplace else, coming here seeking a better way of life, and that is some of this is some of the outcome. I do think there are more people than you'd find in other cities who are willing to catch that ball, so to speak, and try to do something about it. But there is a disparity because Madison has a large, highly educated white population per capita. It's got a high education level, and it's has many urban qualities that are often viewed as desirable in terms of an education citizenry. The impact of the giant impact of the University of Wisconsin, and the fact that we're home to state government play roles in the white collar nature of the city. Meanwhile, like most cities, whatever manufacturing base and whatever family supporting manufacturing jobs or middle class jobs we used to have are far fewer now, so that this population of people seeking a better life in this community don't have a way up that the previous generations might.
Let me jump to stories. Any stories you heard along the way from African Americans that can describe what white people might not get, but in a story form becomes clearer?
I think the one I mentioned earlier is illustrative of the utility executive spouse who is a holder of advanced degrees herself, feeling like she's followed around. Lots of comments about what it feels like to walk down a street and even this is an even in Madison kind of thing, and people crossing the street to avoid them walking near them, of cars locking when people get close. There's a sense that, and I'm acutely aware of this in kind of everything I do. When I interact with African Americans, of them being skeptical of me for what this is really about. Are you really into this cause for the betterment of African Americans, or is it help you as a newspaper editor put a halo on your brand or what you're trying to do? I was putting together an event on race and a conversation about race back in April, and we happily drew an audience of more than 500 people to it. But as I was putting that panel together, I was challenged when I was inviting people, and a couple of them would look at me and say, "Well, I understand what's in it for you, but what's in it for the folks? What's in it for African Americans?" And I had to answer that, and I've made an effort over time. I believe it's a sincere one, to do a whole bunch of things that don't have anything to do with what appears in print or online from my organization. Gone to events, gone to celebrations. Maybe
Why?
Because I want to connect in a way. I want to be as connected and as authentic and as credible with the people we're trying to write about here as it's capable. I know there's a limit as a sort of white guy, as a white editor, to how far that can go. But and I guess this is an admission, because it should have been evident to me long before I've reached this advanced age as an editor. But the degree to which race is central to everything all the time for the people I'm working with on this, that
African American.
If you're African American, it's there all the time. Not just the times you feel slighted or the times you feel that there's a subtle racism, but I'll go to an event at a gymnasium celebrating. I went to an event midwinter celebrating birthday of an elderly African American woman who was actually at Martin Luther King's speech in Washington decades ago, and the community of African Americans coming together there, that it should have occurred to me that this is the bond, but they didn't. It's almost as if they don't expect white people to show up or white people to be any part of their community, and they're very prominent. These folks who showed up, some were not in prominent roles, some were in very prominent roles, but the community, the sense of community, and the sense of them knowing one another and being comfortable with one another and having a shorthand for communicating with one another was real palpable.
Did you
for
feel
me.
left out?
Actually, I felt welcomed because over time I feel like they recognize that I'm in it and we're in it for the long pull to try to focus on community solutions, try to point toward community solutions, and we're not going away. There's a sense. Let me just add one of the things that I've had suggested to me by African American leaders is, well, when is somebody going to come down on you? When is someone going to say, this is enough, this is unhelpful to the community, you're constantly harping on this,
in your paper?
Yes. The spotlight is so bright that it's disproportionate to the degree of the problem that someone is going to, I don't know who exactly that would be without explaining my position relative to our publication's history. But just the sense of, well, this is fine, but somebody's going to come to you at some point and say, enough already. Move on already.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened, and I've said that it's not going to, and there comes a point where I'm asked, well, why this versus other things, and for our community, and this is a little bit community specific, it seems to me that this question about racial disparity in our area is connected to the other major question, which is how are we going to get family supporting jobs that aren't in technology or government or the university, and those are the two major questions facing my community, which I love, and so I'm going to stay on race.
Wow. I was at that forum that you held, and I remember a story of a black guy saying that in his office, if a white woman comes in, he makes sure the door stays open. He never closes the door.
He does that, yes.
And I assume it's because he'll be accused of something, or she might accuse him of something, and people will believe it. Well,
yeah, and just to build on that, Dick, that was a powerful anecdote, and one that really loosened up and made the evening work. There was a bit of caution around the start of the event, and then that gentleman made that comment, and the comment, sadly, in a way, blew back on him to the point that he was, I think, regretting he'd been quite that forthcoming, and I ended up doing a subsequent column about it, sitting down with him and a woman who heads our United Way in town, did a whole other column about what he meant by that and how he didn't mean it to make it. There's such a hypersensitivity among the African American community about how they're heard, and that they don't, and they're so sensitive to being perceived as angry, because anger has not worked, and how
did he mean it that it was misinterpreted?
Well, he works in an organization, a large institution that is led by a woman, and there were the event we're talking about, we both attended, was pretty heavily covered in the media, and when the media excerpt appeared, there was feedback that if that's the way you feel, why do you work for an organization headed by a woman? And it was taken kind of out of context and out of the spirit and pushed back. And African Americans in the community have, I think, an understandable hypersensitivity to that sort of thing, and it did in this case.
As you're the white guy in the room talking about racism, what can you say to white middle-class people from your experience and what you've learned that might tell them something they don't know by the process you've been through?
Well, I'd say a few things, and then maybe if you have thoughts on one, you might want me to talk about more. But I was sort of reflecting on some of the major things, major takeaways. One of them is that however much you don't know what it's like to be African American, you're probably underestimating it. It's impossible to completely feel that, and I think that at this point that that African Americans want their ethnicity to be one factor of who they are instead of always the dominant one, so that as they talk about combating these racial disparities, they want to be full partners with seats at the table, and not share their experiences and their insights and then let white decision makers go off and do it. I've been hammered with the point that if you think you care about this, can you imagine how much we care about this? Because these are our kids, and this is going to take years and even generations to turn around. Something that I knew was important, but has been hammered home to me even more, is how critical they think it is to have African Americans in positions, be it police officers, teachers, journalists, mayors, community leaders of various types who look like them. That you can have, and this is something that comes up in Madison, where there are very few, I think, I won't use a percentage because I might get it wrong, but a very small percentage of African American teachers that no matter how effective and well-intentioned white teachers are, and there are superb ones in this city, that it's not a substitute for having more African American faces in front of kids and
flesh
role
that
models.
out. If you got a great white teacher, what can't that teacher do a black teacher could?
Well, I suppose in the end, be black. I mean, it's. I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
Just as I'm a white guy and I can't be an African American editor teaching the kids.
Yeah.
We have kids come into our newsroom from a local high school kids of color, and they come in and they work right in our newsroom, and we train, and we brought in 2 interns this summer. But ultimately, I'm in the corner office, so to speak, and I'm white, and there's nothing I can do about that. So I don't know.
Well, white privilege, does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, it's a term that's ridiculed by the right wing, but I think it's I think it reflects where we are in society. I haven't spent a lot of time. We had a conference that had white privilege as part of its title, and of course, it created a backlash of conversation. But I do think whites are privileged, and I do think that it's impossible for you to deny that there is a privilege around that, as we are able to go through our that doesn't guarantee success, but I think it makes for a more friction-free path to success, and I guess that's what I think about it.
This sounds inflammatory, maybe it is, but racism. Are most white people racist in ways they don't know? Were you?
Yes.
Any way?
Yes. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, a long time ago, and my high school was an integrated high school, and there was quite a bit of bullying that went on. There were poor kids who came and went truant and so forth, and I think that had long-term implications on my thinking and my reaction and my comfort or fear level around African Americans, something I've had to think about a lot over time and come to grips with. I think anyone who claims to be have no racism anywhere in them is not being honest with himself or herself.
You think if you had more African American friends in your life, you'd be less racist? Not you, but you in the general. I
think probably. I mean, I guess it's
Because you're talking about the separation of these societies.
Yeah, there's just such a profound separation that I can't imagine that we wouldn't have. I mean, over time, I've had more comfortable conversations around the most sensitive aspects of race because of familiarity, just because we've broken bread or had coffee or worked on projects together or attended celebrations or social settings. There's a group of older African Americans who are working on a project to talk about African American, to make displays and presentations of African American history in the community. That process did not start well. There was tension between me and what I was trying to do. We were trying to create a timeline of African American history in town. And of course, one of the other issues that I've had is that African Americans don't have one view. They don't have one voice. They don't have a single perspective on things. So they're very different views of what constitutes African American history in town. And only through multiple conversations and going to them as opposed to having them come to us. I mean, it's a distinction that I think is important. And doing a lot of listening, do I think we've made progress on that? And that's an example. So now I count these people as, I don't know if they say they were friends of mine, but we're acquaintances. We know more about one another, and we've been honest to one another in situations that I don't think that I think a lot of the problems around race are just not taking the time to listen to one another, and devoting that time, I think, is important.
In closing, when you think about how this has all affected you this past year, what's been the biggest impact on you?
I think the biggest impact on me has been a rethinking of where I thought I had come. I mean, I think that, well, let me re-articulate it. When Barack Obama got elected, there was a report, a researcher, an academic at the University of Wisconsin, partnered with someone else on what a great step in terms of us moving beyond a racist America it was. And I happen to believe that we've become more racist, or that the latent racism has been brought back to the surface through the Tea Party and through my progressive view that Barack Obama is essentially a centrist, a kind of a brainy centrist politician, but so much of what's against him is his race. So I think that for me the biggest single thing is that I see race in all sorts of things and ways, and to a level of importance that I wouldn't have a year ago.
In politics or in life?
Both. In politics and in life.
Paul Fanlon, thank you very much. And I hope you'll join us on the next edition of Insights.